Good morning, and welcome to your morning cereal. Okay, good morning, and welcome to Friday, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there. Well, in addition to capitalism's call for selling more cards and flowers for our loved ones, Valentine's Day celebrates the feast of Saint Valentine. And he was a priest and physician who was martyred in the year of 270 in Rome. And the tradition of exchanging greetings of love on Valentine's Day is based on the legend that Valentine had signed a letter to his jailer's daughter, from whom he had fallen in love. And he signed it, quote, "From your Valentine." Well, I guess that's kind of sweet. But if your heart feels like it's breaking today, get yourself to a doctor. Today is also Congenital Heart Defect Awareness Day. Education and prevention are paramount. And if it's too late for you, it's also National Organ Donor Day, a final gift of love. Wow, that really took a dark turn, so let's end this on a little bit of a sweeter note. It's also National Cream-Filled Chocolate Day. Chocolate makes everything better. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right into today's episode with today's quotes. One fun, nostalgic quote, and then a second quote to tease our book review later in the episode. Hopefully, one of these quotes will speak to you and jumpstart your Friday in a positive direction. All right, the first quote today is from Sir Anthony Hopkins, who said, quote, "The most valuable thing you have in your life is your time and energy, and both are limited. When you give your time and energy, it will define your existence," end quote. It's so true. The dash is everything. Make it count and spend it on what's important. What's the dash, you ask? It's what's between your birthday and your death day on your tombstone. That dash is your life. Make it count. My mom gave me that one, so credit goes to my mom. And today's teaser quote from the book review is, "When we are wrong, we may admit it to ourselves. And if we are handled gently and tactfully, we may admit it to others," end quote. As usual, we'll go ahead and unpack that here in just a few minutes during the book review segment. But first, let's jump into our usual dose of fun and historic facts from this day in history. And today's news, facts, and birthdays are for February 14th. Starting back in 1779, Captain James Cook was killed by Hawaiians in a dispute over the theft of a cutter. I was actually just swimming in that bay about 6 months ago. Wish I was still there right now. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell, you might recognize that name, he applied for the patent for the telephone. Then in 1920, Carrie Chapman Catt, she formed the League of Women Voters in Chicago. 9 years later, also in Chicago, in 1929 on this date, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred. Recall, it included members of Al Capone's gang of bootleggers shooting up a rival gang during the Prohibition era. In 1973, the Miami Dolphins won the Super Bowl. And what's interesting about that one is they capped off the only undefeated season in NFL history. Then in 1991, the psychological thriller The Silence of the Lambs, it was released in American theaters on this day. Funny that it was on Valentine's Day. It was widely regarded as a classic. It won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, and the Best Director. Then in 2003, Dolly the sheep was put to death after showing signs of premature aging and contracting various diseases. You'll remember Dolly, right? She was the first mammal to be cloned. Then finally, in 2005, Steve Chen, Chad Hurley, and Jod Kareem, they registered a website called YouTube for sharing videos. I think they ended up doing okay. In fact, you might be watching me on YouTube right now. Well, happy birthday if today is your birthday. You share a birthday with Teller of Penn and Teller. He's 77. Simon Pegg, you might know him from the Mission Impossible films. He's 55. And singer Rob Thomas, he's 53 today. And the number one song on this day was a song that I picked in honor of Valentine's, the Day of Love. And oftentimes it's a bit of a sexy day too. So the number one song on this date back in 1992 was "I'm Too Sexy" by Right Said Fred. No doubt you remember that one. It has to be one of the worst number one songs of all time, although it was very catchy. Surprisingly, this was Right Said Fred's first song on their first album, and it went straight to number one. But maybe not surprisingly, it was their only number one hit. Perhaps the number 2 song on that date was also appropriate for Valentine's Day, and that was I Love Your Smile by Shanice. And the number 1 movie on this date back in 2001 is another movie that I picked that was inspired by Valentine's Day. And it was Hannibal. This is the movie starring Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Hannibal Lecter, and it's the sequel to The Silence of the Lambs. And before your mind gets too morbid here, I picked this movie for Valentine's Day because some of you are headed out for a nice Valentine's Day dinner tonight. And I thought this would serve as a nice reminder to pair your wine wisely. As Hannibal said, I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to some personal growth in the book review segment of Morning Cereal. This is where we take a few moments to reflect on lessons learned from the current book we're reading. And currently, we're still reading through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. As you all know, say it together with me, it's a timeless book that is consistently on all the must-read lists, and it's packed with rock-solid advice and actions for us all to use and build healthy foundational concepts to live by. We're still making our way through Part 2 and Chapter 2 of Part 2, entitled A Sure Way of Making Enemies and How to Avoid It. And Carnegie began this chapter by revealing the art in conversations, whether we are right or wrong. We're learning that it's difficult to change someone's way of thinking and their beliefs, and that's because they're deeply held and they're associated with their self-esteem. And as such, people will cling to them, even unreasonably. So we need to artfully approach these conversations, looking for the facts and looking for common ground, looking for the other person's perspective, and then openly admitting to it if we're wrong. Today, we'll jump right into a Carnegie story, illustrating the art of this perspective. As the story goes, Carnegie had hired an interior decorator to make some draperies for his home. And when he received the bill, he was shocked at how much he had been charged. A few days later, a friend came by and the price came up. And the friend said, "What? That's awful. I'm afraid he put one over on you," end quote. And here's the lesson in this short story. Carnegie's friend had told the truth, and Carnegie even agreed with what the friend said. However, here it is. The truth that the friend spoke to, the high price, well, that comment reflected on Carnegie's judgment in a negative way. And Carnegie, human as he is also, and as we all are, naturally, human nature made him feel defensive. He felt the need to defend his judgment of the price he paid, even though he agreed it was way too much. So Carnegie, instead of just agreeing with his friend, he tried to defend the price he paid by talking about the quality and the money he'd save over time for the overpriced curtains. Alternatively, Carnegie had another friend who also came over and was admiring the curtains and, quote, bubbled over with enthusiasm and wished she could afford such exquisite creations for her home, end quote. And this time Carnegie reacted totally different. He told his friend he couldn't afford them himself and that he paid too much and he wished he had not ordered them. Carnegie says, quote, "When we are wrong, we may admit it to ourselves. And if we are handled gently and tactfully, we may admit it to others and even take pride in our frankness and broad-mindedness. But not if someone else is trying to ram that unpalatable fact down our esophagus," end quote. And that's right on. We usually know when we are wrong. We don't like to admit it, unless it's a safe environment, and we surely don't like to be told we are wrong. Carnegie next highlights a man who wrote many letters complaining, ridiculing, and personally attacking President Lincoln, trying to get the president to change his policies. And did it work? No. Carnegie says, quote, "Ridicule and abuse never do," end quote. Carnegie has often called on the journey of Benjamin Franklin, who had to learn the art of dealing with people, growing from a combative youth to a suave diplomat as he got older. And Carnegie points to a passage in Franklin's autobiography about the turning point for him. And here's that passage. Quote, "Ben, you are impossible. Your opinions have a slap in them for everyone who differs with you. They have become so offensive that nobody cares for them. Your friends find they enjoy themselves better when you are not around. You know so much that no man can tell you anything. Indeed, no man is going to try, for the effort would lead only to discomfort and hard work. So you are not likely ever to know any more than you do now, which is very little," end quote. And Franklin took that to heart and made an about-face that day saying, quote, made a rule to forbear all direction, contradiction to the sentiment of others, end quote. And he altered the way he spoke to people so that he didn't speak with fixed opinions anymore. He didn't make lashing points with certainty. Instead, he would say, quote, I imagined, or he wouldn't tear others' ideas apart, suggesting potential differences in their perspectives, modestly introducing his opinion. And this worked for Franklin. He was less embarrassed when he was wrong, and others were more open to seeing his way when he was right. Franklin also mentions that it took discipline for him to change these habits, and over time. But over time, it became very natural for him. And this art of interaction that he mastered over his life, along with his character and his integrity, he said helped him generally prevail with his points despite being, quote, a bad speaker, never eloquent, subject to much hesitation in my choice of words, hardly correct in his language, end quote. Well, I can definitely relate with that. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to finish Chapter 2 of Part 3, and we're going to learn Carnegie's next principle in a chapter entitled A Sure Way of Making Enemies and How to Avoid It. Well, no doubt you've not made enemies. You've made loved ones, and I hope you get to spend tonight with them. And if not with them, honoring and remembering the many great memories you had with them. Thanks for listening today. Have a wonderful weekend and a fantastic day, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Morning Serial podcast on the One Life Live It channel. You can find more episodes and videos by visiting our YouTube channel and the website at Sean Inglis and at SeanInglis.com, where you can also follow our other podcasts, the Mr. and Mrs. Inglis podcast and the Life Happens podcast. In these other podcasts, we'll dive deeper into everyday issues, self-improvement and well-being, business and finance, and we welcome special guests too. So join us. It'll be a good time, I promise. Thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow.